My wife cheated on me with her boss, then lied about our $500, $0 inheritance to hide her affair, only for me to discover she secretly signed over our house worth $750, $0 to her sister. Now we're headed for a legal battle I never saw coming. I never thought I'd be the guy writing about how my wife turned out to be a total cheat, but here I am. The craziest part is that I caught her in the act, and it wasn't just some random flirtation. She was screwing her boss, Mark, right under my nose. That moment hit me like a freight train. It was unexpected, sudden, and it changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. And I had been together for almost 10 years. We met in college, got married right after, and for a long time I thought we were solid. She was the perfect wife, or so I believed. She was ambitious, pretty, always dressed to impress, and she played the part of the loving spouse flawlessly. But lately, I'd started noticing little things that didn't add up. She'd be secretive with her phone, hiding it whenever I walked into the room. She'd suddenly become more distant, less affectionate, and her excuses for missing dates or being too busy at work sounded more hollow every time. At first, I brushed it off. I figured maybe she was stressed, or maybe I was just imagining things. But then I started noticing her behavior change around her work schedule. She'd stay late more often, claiming she was working on a big project. She'd come home smelling different, more perfume, a different scent I didn't recognize. And her phone was always locked, with a password she refused to share anymore. I was starting to feel like I was losing grip on my own marriage. One night, I decided to do some digging. I knew kept her phone nearby at all times, and I had a hunch that I'd find something. I waited until she went out to the grocery store. When she was gone, I slipped into her purse, feeling like a damn spy, and found her phone tucked away in the side pocket. I unlocked it with her passcode, something I'd seen her use enough times, and started scrolling through her messages. That's when I saw it. A string of texts between her and Mark, her boss, that made my stomach turn. They weren't just friendly work chats. No, they were flirty, suggestive, and downright inappropriate. She was talking about meeting him for a quick drink after work, and how much she enjoyed their secret moments. The word sex came up more than once. I saw pictures she sent him, short clips of her in lingerie, half naked, with suggestive captions. I couldn't believe my eyes. My wife, my partner, my best friend, was cheating on me with her boss. I felt a mix of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief all at once. How could she lie to my face for months? How could she betray everything we built? I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I sat there, trembling, holding her phone like it was a weapon and a confession at the same time. The betrayal ran deep. It was like someone had torn my heart out, stepped on it, and then handed it back to me soaked in lies. I kept thinking about all the times she told me she loved me, how she'd always say I was her world. Turns out, I was just a backup plan while she was out screwing her boss. That's when I knew I had to confront her face to face, but I also knew I couldn't do it without a plan. The next morning, I waited until she woke up. I remember feeling cold and numb as I sat by the bed, clutching her phone in my hand. When she finally opened her eyes and saw me sitting there, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she asked, "What's going on? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "I know about Mark. I saw the messages, I saw everything." Her face turned pale for a moment, then she snapped back with her usual bitchy attitude. "You're overreacting as usual. You're just jealous. It's nothing, just work stuff." But I knew better. I saw her lie, I saw her deceive, and I saw her try to minimize what I'd uncovered. That's when I realized this wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown affair, and it was just the beginning of a storm I wasn't prepared for. The trust I had in her was shattered, and I could feel the anger building up inside me. I didn't want to just walk away and forget about it. No, I needed to find out what was really going on, how deep this went, and what she'd done with our money, our house, everything. Because I had a feeling this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about control, lies, and betrayal on a scale I never imagined. I knew I had to stay calm, gather evidence, and plan my next move carefully. But inside, I was already boiling with rage. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It felt like she'd stolen everything I cared about, including my sanity. I couldn't let this go. I had to fight back, and I was determined to make her pay for what she'd done. After I confronted that morning, everything changed. She spun her usual lies, said I was paranoid, that Mark was just a colleague, that I was overreacting because I didn't want her to have a life outside of our marriage. She even had the nerve to accuse me of spying, claiming I was just insecure and jealous. Honestly, I was furious. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she pretend? Everything was normal after I'd caught her red-handed, but I wasn't about to let her gaslight me. I had the evidence, and I knew this wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown affair, and she had been sneaking around for months. I decided I needed to know everything, how deep this went, what she'd done with our money, and what kind of lies she'd been spinning behind my back. I couldn't just walk away from this without knowing the full extent of her betrayal. The first thing I did was dig into our finances. Was always the one handling the bills, the investments, the inheritance stuff. She was good at hiding things, but I was persistent. I pulled out our bank statements, looked through our accounts, and started noticing strange transactions. First, there were some large wire transfers, 50, 0 here, $100, $0 there, that I didn't recognize. When I pressed her about it, she brushed it off, saying they were business investments or loans to friends. But I knew she was lying. I could tell by her tone, the way she avoided eye contact, and the way she suddenly got defensive. Then I remembered something about the inheritance. We were supposed to get a $500, $0 payout from my late uncle's estate. It was supposed to be ours, split evenly, and it was supposed to give us a fresh start after years of hard work, but had been acting strangely about it. She kept saying she'd handle everything, that I didn't need to worry. When I finally demanded to see the papers, she'd refused, claiming it was complicated and that I'd just get in her way. That night, I decided to do some digging on my own. I hired a private investigator just to confirm what I already suspected. A few days later, he called me with some shocking news. Had signed papers, secret ones, and transferred our house, worth about $750, $0 to her sister, Lisa. I couldn't believe it. She basically given away our home without telling me, under the guise of some family favor. When I confronted about it, her reaction was pure deflection. She said she'd done what was necessary for the family, that Lisa needed a place to stay, and that I was overreacting. I knew she was lying. I knew she'd been planning this for a while. And then I found out about the inheritance. Turns out had been secretly claiming that the money was stuck in probate and not accessible yet, but I got proof, emails, bank statements, all showing she'd already moved a significant part of that inheritance into accounts only she controlled. She was hiding money, lying about the inheritance, and using her sister as her pawn. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she lie so convincingly, manipulate everyone around her, and keep me in the dark? The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. I started to see how deep her deception ran. She'd been living a double life, and I was just a pawn in her game. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. She built a web of lies that spun out of control, and now I was caught in the middle. The house, the inheritance, the affair, everything was collapsing around me, and I had no idea how to stop it. I sat in my office that night, staring at the documents, trying to process everything. My mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just blow everything up without a plan. I needed legal advice, and I needed to protect myself and what was left of our assets. I realized that manipulations ran deeper than I thought, and if I didn't act fast, she'd keep lying, keep hiding, and maybe even try to take everything I had left. So I contacted a lawyer the next morning. I gave her all the evidence I'd collected: texts, emails, bank statements, the property transfer. She told me I had a strong case to challenge the house transfer, and that I could potentially reclaim the inheritance. But she also warned me that was clever. She'd probably have some tricks up her sleeve, maybe even try to hide more money or assets. I was prepared for a legal battle, but inside I was broken. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, respect, and my entire life being turned upside down. I couldn't believe I was in this situation. I had always been the guy who believed in honesty, hard work, and loyalty. Now, I was fighting to keep what was mine while watching my wife's lies unravel everything I thought I knew. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, and I had no idea how it was going to end. The legal advice I got was a wake-up call. My lawyer, Susan, looked through everything I handed her, screenshots of the texts, bank statements, the property transfer documents, and she was straightforward. She said, "You've got a solid case to challenge the house transfer, but's already moved a lot of the inheritance money into accounts she controls. She's been pretty slick about hiding her tracks, but I think we can uncover more if we dig deeper." That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be a quick fix. Had been planning her moves for months, maybe even longer. Over the next few weeks, I started building my case. I hired a private investigator again, this time to track recent activities. I wanted to know if she was still seeing Mark, if she'd been trying to hide more assets, or if she'd been making any new moves to cover her tracks. The investigator's reports confirmed my fears, was still in contact with Mark, and she was actively trying to liquidate some of our remaining assets. She'd even opened new bank accounts in her sister Lisa's name, which she used to funnel money. It was like watching her dismantle everything I thought was secure, piece by piece. Meanwhile, was still playing her game. She acted like everything was normal when she was home, bitchy, dismissive, and often outright rude. She'd throw tantrums over the smallest things, accusing me of controlling her, of trying to ruin her reputation. She'd say I was just jealous and paranoid, but I knew better. I saw her sneaking around, lying, hiding documents. She'd always have some excuse. She was doing it for the family, or it's just business. But I knew she was lying. She'd lied to my face so many times I couldn't even tell what was real anymore. One night I confronted her directly about the money she'd moved out of our joint accounts. I caught her sneaking into her sister Lisa's house, holding a stack of papers and a briefcase. She tried to brush me off, saying she was just visiting her sister, but I wasn't buying it. I blocked her in the driveway, told her I knew she'd been lying about the inheritance, about the house, about everything. She looked at me with that icy bitchy glare and said, "You're blowing this out of proportion. I've done nothing wrong. You're just insecure because I don't want to be tied down to your stupid rules." That's when I realized how deep her manipulations went. She's always been good at twisting things around, making me doubt myself, making me feel like I was the crazy one. But I was. I had proof. I had witnesses. I had her own words on her phone. I decided I was done playing her game. I told her that I was going to fight for my rights, that I was going to take her to court, and that I wanted full transparency. No more lies, no more secrets. Things escalated quickly after that. Started to get more aggressive, more bitchy, trying to sabotage my efforts. She would trash my office, hide documents, even try to get her sister Lisa to lie on her behalf. Lisa was complicit, of course, and she played her part well, pretending to be innocent, but I knew she was just as involved in scheme. I kept my cool, gathering every piece of evidence I could, knowing that the more I uncovered, the stronger my case would be. In the meantime, I started talking to friends and family about what was happening. I needed support, and I needed to be prepared for what was coming. I told my brother everything: the betrayal, the lies, the house transfer, the hidden inheritance, and he was furious for me. He said I was crazy for sticking around so long, but I told him I wanted to see what she'd do next. I refused to be played for a fool anymore. I also made sure to document every interaction, every lie, every move made. I knew this was about to get ugly, and I needed to be ready. The hardest part was the emotional toll. I was angry, yes, but also deeply hurt. I'd loved, I'd trusted her. And now I felt like I was fighting to reclaim my life from someone who had been secretly plotting against me for months. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see it coming. Was I just so blinded by love that I ignored her betrayals? Or was I too comfortable, thinking everything was fine? Whatever the reason, I knew I couldn't go back. Not now, not after everything I'd uncovered. I made a decision: I would fight for what's mine. I'm not just talking about the house or the money, I mean my dignity, my integrity, and my future. I've been played for a fool long enough. Whatever her reasons, greed, betrayal, anger, I was done being a passive victim. I was going to make her pay, legally and emotionally. And I was going to do everything I could to protect what little I had left. Because at this point, I realized that sometimes you have to fight dirty to get your life back. The legal process started moving faster than I expected. Once I handed everything over to Susan, my lawyer, she wasted no time filing the necessary motions. Challenging the house transfer was the first step, and she made a compelling case that had fraudulently transferred the property without my knowledge or consent. I still couldn't believe she'd done that, giving away our home like it was nothing, all to cover her tracks. That house was our biggest asset, and now she'd handed it over to her sister Lisa, who I had no trust in either. While the legal battle was, behavior grew even more erratic. She'd lash out at me over the smallest things, calling me paranoid, jealous, or crazy whenever I pressed her about the money or her whereabouts. She'd scream at me, accuse me of trying to control her, and throw tantrums that reminded me of a spoiled child. Her bitchy attitude was relentless. I started to see that her entire personality was built around deception and manipulation. The more I uncovered, the more I realized she'd been lying to me for years, using me as a pawn in her game. One day I came home to find her packing a suitcase. She looked at me with that familiar sneer and said, "I'm leaving. I've had enough of your accusations. You're just insecure and I can't deal with your paranoia anymore." I stared at her, feeling my blood boil. I told her she wasn't going anywhere, that I had evidence of her fraud and that she was going to answer for her lies. She scoffed and told me I was trying to control her, that I was jealous of her success, and that she didn't owe me anything. That night I sat alone in the living room watching her pack her things. I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief because I knew I was finally getting some clarity, but heartbreak because I'd loved her once. I'd built a life with her, and now that life was crumbling before my eyes. I started thinking about the inheritance, how she'd lied about its status, how she'd secretly claimed it, and how she'd been planning to disappear with everything. It was a sickening feeling, knowing she'd been so manipulative, so selfish. I called Susan again and asked her what she thought about the next steps. She advised me to prepare for her to fight back legally, claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I was harassing her, and possibly even trying to take away her rights. But she also said I had a strong case, especially with the evidence I'd collected. She recommended filing for a court injunction to prevent from transferring any more assets, and she suggested I start gathering witnesses, friends, family, who could testify to some manipulations and lies. Meanwhile, started playing the victim. She accused me of destroying her reputation, of trying to ruin her life, just because I was fighting to protect what's mine. She sent angry messages calling me possessive, abusive, and jealous, as if I was the bad guy. I could see through her act now. It was all part of her scheme to turn people against me, to make herself look innocent. But I knew she was just trying to cover her tracks, to buy herself more time and manipulate the court of public opinion. Things got even more intense when Sister Lisa stepped into the picture. She was complicit from the start, signing over our house, helping hide assets, and lying to cover her sister's tracks. I started to collect evidence against Lisa too, because I knew she'd played a key role. I hired my investigator again, and he caught Lisa meeting with in secret, exchanging envelopes filled with cash, and discussing how to avoid the legal issues. The level of betrayal was staggering. It wasn't just her entire family was involved in this web of deception. Throughout all this, I felt a growing sense of determination. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I'd fought for years to build a life, and now I was fighting to keep what little was left. Every day was a battle: emails, court filings, meetings with my lawyer, and sleepless nights thinking about how much I'd lost. But I also realized something else. I was stronger than I thought. I had evidence, I had witnesses, and I had a legal team behind me. That gave me hope, even as I felt the weight of betrayal crushing me. One night I sat down and looked at everything I'd gathered: photos, bank statements, texts, witness statements, and I finally understood that this wasn't just about money or property. It was about respect. about being betrayed by someone I'd trusted with my entire life. I'd been played, manipulated, and lied to for so long, I almost didn't recognize my own marriage. But now I was taking it back. I was fighting for my rights, for my sanity, and for the truth. And I knew, deep down, that this legal battle was just the beginning of a long, hard road ahead. The courtroom became mine. Every piece of evidence I'd collected, from the texts to the financial records, was laid out like a weapon. Susan, my lawyer, was relentless. She argued that transfer of the house was fraudulent, that she deliberately concealed the inheritance, and that her manipulations were part of a pattern of deceit. I watched as sat across from me, her bitchy smirk barely hiding her frustration. She kept insisting she'd done nothing wrong, that I was just jealous and paranoid, but Susan shredded her defenses one by one. Meanwhile, family tried to spin their own version of events. Lisa, her sister, that she'd signed over the house at request, claiming it was a gift for helping out with some family emergency. But I had the emails, the bank transfers, and the witness statements that proved Lisa had been coerced into signing away the property under direction. The judge wasn't buying her story. The evidence was too overwhelming. I felt a strange mixture of relief and rage as the case progressed. For the first time, I saw justice within reach, proof that lies, her manipulations, and her greed were finally being exposed. But I also felt a deep sadness. I had loved her once, and now I was fighting her in court. That thought haunted me. How did we get here? How did someone I trusted so completely become this manipulative, selfish person? Every day I stared at her, I felt like I was staring at a stranger, someone who had betrayed everything we ever built. The legal battle was intense. Kept trying to twist the narrative, claiming I was trying to control her, that I was harassing her, and that she deserved to keep her assets. She hired her own lawyer, and they argued that she was entitled to the inheritance and the house because she'd acted in good faith. But Susan was sharp. She presented evidence that had been planning her moves for months, secretly signing over the house and fencing off the inheritance money. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. One of the most shocking moments came when the lawyer tried to claim that I was emotionally unstable and that I was trying to manipulate the court. It was a desperate move, and Susan shot it down immediately. She pointed out that I had maintained clear, consistent documentation of all the lies and manipulations. I'd been transparent and diligent from the start. I saw his face flush with anger as her lawyer's argument fell apart. That's when I realized how fragile her facade was. Her entire scheme was unraveling piece by piece. The judge finally announced her decision. She was ordering the house transfer to be invalid, and that had to start returning the assets she'd hidden or transferred. The ruling was a huge blow to, and she looked furious. She argued, shouted, and even tried to intimidate witnesses, but it was no use. The evidence was too strong. I felt a surge of relief but also exhaustion. This legal battle had taken everything out of me, but the aftermath was just as complicated as the fight itself. Refused to accept defeat quietly. She went on a tirade, claiming I was trying to ruin her, and she threatened to appeal the decision. She even accused me of harassment and abuse, trying to turn friends and family against me. Her sister Lisa, involved in the scheme from the start, backed her up, claiming I was trying to control life. It was a bitter, ongoing war of words, and I knew it wasn't over yet. I started to realize that the real damage wasn't just the house or the money, it was the trust I'd lost. I'd been by her lies, manipulated into thinking we had a future together, only to find out she'd been planning her escape for months. I felt betrayed, angry, and lost, but I also knew I couldn't let her win completely. I had to keep fighting, not just for the assets but for my dignity. I'd learned that some people are capable of incredible deception, and that trust has to be earned and maintained every single day. In the quiet moments after the court ruling, I sat alone and reflected on everything I'd been through. I realized I'd come out of this a different person, stronger, more cautious, and more aware of how easily trust can be broken. I also learned that justice isn't always quick or easy, but it's worth fighting for. And I understood that sometimes the biggest victories come from standing your ground, even when the world feels like it's crumbling around you. Now, I just have to decide what's next, whether I rebuild my life or keep fighting to hold onto what's left. Either way, I know one thing: I'll never let someone betray me like this again. After the court's decision, I thought I'd finally get some peace, but the aftermath kept dragging on. Was furious, of course, and she refused to accept defeat quietly. She kept insisting she'd appeal the ruling, claiming I'd manipulated her, that I was just jealous and controlling. She even started spreading rumors to friends and family, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Her sister Lisa was right there with her, lying through her teeth about how I'd been abusive and how I'd ruined life. It was a sickening spectacle, but I refused to back down. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the house or the inheritance anymore. It was about trust, how someone I loved and trusted could be so manipulative, so dishonest. I couldn't believe I'd been played so thoroughly, but I also realized that I had fought for what was right. I'd uncovered her lies, challenged her in court, and protected what was left of my life. That gave me a sense of closure, even if the emotional scars still stung. I decided to focus on rebuilding myself. I cut ties with most of family, realizing they'd been complicit in her schemes. I sought therapy to deal with the betrayal and anger, and I threw myself into work, anything to keep my mind busy and my heart from sinking into despair. I started to see that, despite everything, I was still capable of creating a new life. It wasn't what I'd imagined, but it was mine now, and I had to make the best of it. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned was about the importance of vigilance. I trusted blindly for so long, and it almost destroyed me. I learned that people can hide their true selves behind a facade, and that sometimes you have to dig deep and question everything, even those closest to you. I also learned that justice might take time, but it's worth fighting for. That standing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable or painful, is the only way to truly reclaim your life. Now, I'm not the same man I was before all this happened. I'm more cautious, more aware, and definitely more guarded. But I'm also stronger. I know what betrayal looks like, and I refuse to let it define me. I still have hope for the future, even if I don't know exactly what it holds. I just know that I'll never let anyone manipulate or betray me again. If there's one thing I can say to anyone reading this, it's this: trust is precious, but it's fragile. Protect it fiercely. Be honest with yourself and others, and never ignore the warning signs. Because when someone's lying, hiding, or manipulating, no matter who they are, you have to stand up and fight. Even if it's messy, even if it hurts, it's better than living in a web of lies. And in the end, truth and integrity are what really matter. This whole experience has changed me forever. I don't regret fighting for what was right, because now I see clearly. And I hope that anyone going through something similar finds the strength to do the same. Because no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way out, and there's always a lesson waiting to be learned.